Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to the Dying Alone podcast. I'm Gray Carter, and joining me are Gav Dunn.
Hey.
Cory Rydell.
Hello.
And Paul Goodman, formerly of The Escapist.
Hello, everybody.
Did you notice how I actually forgot your name during that intro, Gavin? It took like a moment to actually remember it.
Well, you call him so
you know,
many other
he always forgets my name in bed as well.
Yeah.
or calls out the wrong name.
Yeah, well, he calls you such other colorful phrases too. So I mean,
yeah.
I mean, your Twitter conversations are the things of legends.
Yeah, he calls out like Snake or Raiden, and I'm like, dude, come on, seriously.
Not even in bed, not just the podcast,
just all the time,
also in bed.
Yeah, all the time.
Oh, speaking of which, without Gabe here, there is going to be a drought of Metal Gear talk, which we'll heard.
We clearly miss him though. We've already brought it back to Metal Gear.
We have
he was here in our hearts.
Well, Gray spent like an hour today on Steam trying to convince me to play it. So.
Well, which one exactly? Which Metal Gear? That's
Three.
The one.
All of them.
Oh god.
No, I'm not that silly. I 3 is the one I like evangelize. It's the one you can get new players into.
Yeah, I would say 3 is pretty good. And the
Like,
first one, Metal Gear Solid, the old PS1 era one's pretty solid. 2, I don't know, felt like all over the place for me.
2 is the best game.
And then
2 is the most artistically sound, but it's mad as fuck. So
and
you
then,
can't.
and then 4, I just watched. Like, I didn't even bother trying to play it. I just downloaded all the cutscenes, and it was like, wow, 14 hours later.
Jesus.
Okay, so today's topic is... Oh, sorry, Gab, did you want to say something? You want to add something about Metal Gear? Something wrong? Something...
That's what gets me about Metal Gear. It's like, it's mostly cutscenes, which is fine if you're into it, but I just don't enjoy the cutscenes. So, well, I don't think that's going to do it for me.
Well, that's the problem, is that
place for it.
Yeah, over time it's become more cutscenes. Because, Metal Gear Solid 1, I definitely felt there was a better ratio, but then over time it was like... Just make a movie already, okay? Just don't clearly want to make movies. Don't make games, make movies.
Metal Gear Solid 4 was ridiculous. The amount of actual content to cutscenes was just absurd.
Plus, there's that very particular style that the story is presented in that just doesn't... It fails to entice me. And it's not like I don't want to enjoy it. It's not the case of, oh, fuck this, I hate it. It's just, no, it just doesn't do it for me. Like... Yeah. And I played 3 different games. I played 2. I played Revengeance, and I played the new one. And just in all 3 of them, the story was
fucking here, and we still can't stop talking about Metal Gear Solid.
Let us move on, everybody.
Well, he's going to be pissed. He's going to be pissed he missed it.
So today's topic, or today's vague topic, is video game journalism, a hotly debated subject these days.
Very much so.
Brought to mind by the very surprising shuttering of Joystiq.
Oh yeah, that was...
Which I think was easily one of the better outlets out there.
It's 10 years running, I think, is how long Joystiq's been active, and it's the end of... It's totally the end of an era and an institution, because there's so many great people have worked for Joystiq or have come from Joystiq in the past, so it's been really surreal to have one of those institutions of the whole game journalism thing just disappear so suddenly.
Small disclaimer, I have done a few reviews for Joystiq, so I am a little bit biased.
And I am biased because I am good friends with Susan, so...
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
And some of those guys were on my panels back when I was with The Escapist at PAX East, so, a little bit of disclosure there, but yeah, it's just great people all over.
I think it was a class act, Joystiq. It's it wasn't straight news, but it was rare. It was funny rather than biased, and it kind of handled a lot of social issues, which I know is a hot topic in gaming right now, whether we should cover it or not. But it covered them in a very non-preachy way.
Yeah, I mean, I always felt like they tried whenever, because at this point, the gaming hobby has been around for a long time. Obviously, a lot more people are gamers now, so a lot more things are going to be discussed about it. And I always liked the way Joystiq approached it, and trying to be hey, here's something we should talk about and have more conversations about, versus just an A or B, us or them kind of deal.
I think if everyone approached it with that approach, there wouldn't be so much controversy at all. If everyone approached it, well, let's have these discussions and let's have them without...
Well, I mean, a huge part of the arguments online is just how people have the discussions. That's all it boils down to. Because I think a lot of people are like-minded on these issues. But it's just like some people are
Oh, yeah.
overbearing, and some people like make others feel bad with how they argue. And
I think I'm going to disagree with you there, Cory. I've seen some very, very reasonable articles on, usually about sexism or racism in games or the gaming sphere, and they can be the most lukewarm, well-put arguments, and you're still going to get like not massive crowds, but this core of like grotesque douchebags just being cocks in the comments.
Yeah, that's the. I guess that's like the one. That's certainly a downside. I think is that there's always going to be this hardcore small demographic that's simply going to try to outshout anyone who says anything they disagree with. And like for me, it's like at that point, it's like why bother? Because you're just shutting down the conversation. Like no one's learning anything if those people are just coming in and yelling and not being conducive to the conversation. And it's frustrating. That's happened before. Like I've seen that in some of my comments for my reviews and everything. It's just like hey, why did you say this about this game? And then people would just jump on and start attacking that person, and then it would just kind of descend into like a like a clusterfuck of like, guys, like you're missing the entire point. What is everyone talking about?
And I think it's only fair to point out that like these really extreme people exist on every corner of the political spectrum.
Oh god, yeah, that's definitely true.
But I do agree with Cory's core point there that there are a lot of self-described progressive sites that frame these arguments in the least useful way possible. Like I think I saw an article today, let me go find the name of it, and it was something along the lines of we have to crush the last white nerd space or something.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I saw that earlier.
I mean, I don't understand what that title is going to achieve or how that's going to push anyone to anything positive. Yeah, honestly.
And I wonder if that is just like the clickbaity nature of like how you have to do writing nowadays, like because hyperbole in just like normal speech has like risen to such high levels that like you really like you need to grab people, and I don't know.
Okay, so it was actually called "We Must Bulldoze What's Left of the Nerdy White Men's Internet." And this is right below a picture of a baby, a screaming baby in a Gamergate like set of pajamas. And
I read that earlier today. Yeah.
I'm not a fan of Gamergate, but there are ways to open conversations, and there's ways to just set shit on fire.
Yeah.
And that kind of falls into the latter.
And I think that there are a lot of people, again, on both sides of that debate that benefit from it continuing and continue to poke and prod the fire because it benefits them.
No, I definitely agree on that point that there's
I don't think we should. Can we agree it right from the start here? We're not going to mention any names or particular people.
I'm not comfortable with names, just in the sense because of like you don't want to have to deal with that, especially since over Twitter and like Twitter in a lot of ways is the worst way to have any kind of conversation because it's 140 characters. It's so hard. And I remember Gavin, you were talking about this like last night, like how hard it is to get a coherent thought out in several 140 character bits, and then just not try not to have it, come out wrong.
And if you don't express it the way you meant to and fuck it up, the social media will remember that forever, and you'll always be the person with this belief that you don't actually have, but just phrased it in a bad way.
Yeah, that's why whenever I'm trying to tweet like a big thought that's gonna take multiple tweets, I'll like write it all out in like in Word or something, and I'll like count the fucking letters just to be like, all right, I've now set it up, I've thought everything through, like this is the perfect set of 3 tweets. That takes like 10-15 minutes, and I'm like post them all online. Got it.
I think one thing that
social media also doesn't take into account due to the permanence of its statements is that you can change your mind about things. You can feel one way about something, but then maybe do more research and feel later a different way, which is why I was saying last night that it's usually not prudent to speak about things until you've really formed an opinion, which I've been trying my best to do this year.
And that's certainly an issue too, is that sometimes when you do that and you make a mistake, it can be very hard to own up to that mistake and say you were wrong. And I definitely think we've seen that a lot, just in general over the past couple of years.
People get stuck in that mindset, but I also think the way Twitter works doesn't help.
Oh goodness, no.
You find someone who I'm going to use an example here, Gabe from Penny Arcade, who said something kind of insensitive when he said he made a point about women always having vaginas on a Kotaku article, and it was like a harmless comment.
Yeah.
And it came from ignorance rather than malice, and the way Twitter responded just pushed him into a corner.
Yeah.
And rather than just considering what he'd said or why people were annoyed, he did the very human thing, which is just he lashed out to what he perceived as bullying, and to what is, I think, I'm not like defending what he said, but I do think it is bullying to a certain degree.
Yeah. It's sometimes I think it's also an issue like not having a filter to filter out the legitimate concerns from the crap, because no matter what you say on the internet, if it's in a public sphere, someone somewhere is going to be a jerk about it. You know, regardless of the political spectrum or whatever, you know, your personal beliefs are or whatever, there's always someone who's going to be a jerk for the sake of being a jerk. And it's like, it's an issue of like being able to filter out who's just being a jerk for being a jerk and who's actually like trying to have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
And explain better, like, you know, hey, this is why what you said is very concerning, or why it's wrong, or why, you know, it may offend other people and that's why people are upset, versus you're just an asshole, fuck you, etc., etc. It's like, it's just a matter of like, and that's a hard thing to have on the internet, is that filter, because like even in real life, when, you know, you see criticism for something, it can be hard to distinguish what is like useful criticism versus someone just bringing you down for the sake of bringing you down. You know, it was like that all through college for me. Is, you know, I had a professor who was very harsh in his critique. Like, he would tell students to go kill themselves. I mean, he eventually lightened up, but it was like filtering. Yeah, it was hard. He was a harsh guy. But
what a motivator!
I know, but like it would be like this thing where it's like you had to filter out, like, okay, he's trying to, you know, give you actual criticism and advice. He's just doing it in a really bad way. And then eventually he kind of lightened up and was like, this is why your project is bad or doesn't work. And he got rid of that whole, you know, go drink bleach, you know, kind of thing he would throw out. And I think that's like a big issue, is that on the internet it can be really hard, especially over Twitter, because again, it's 140 characters. It can be really hard to filter out who are the people who are telling you to go drink bleach and who are the people who are trying to give you actual helpful critique. You know?
Well, yeah, it's much easier in a tweet to just go, "You're a cunt." Do you know?
This guy sounds like the perfect person to play Dota with. Like,
oh my goodness!
I can imagine myself telling a faceless voidlater to go drink bleach.
I mean, he was pretty infamous. Like, I never got it that bad, but, you know, there definitely were a couple times where it's like, I'm in the room, you can tell me why you think I suck to my face, it's okay. You know, but...
I would like to add that the things I say in Dota 2 are not indicative of my general attitudes. I'm very much against telling people to kill themselves unless I'm playing Dota 2.
It's weird like that. I am the same, and it's just like...
You're an awful person when you're playing Dota 2, dude. You are like genuinely terrible.
I want to play MOBAs to better understand them, but I'm afraid of what it'll do to me.
They're bad for you. I think that's just how it is. They're bad for you physically and mentally.
Yeah.
I think Cory and I have been working together for about 5 years, and we've had very, very few arguments, and most of the arguments we've had have been over Dota. It's
just because he's bad.
Numerically, dude, I'm afraid I'm not.
Yeah. Numerically, you are also bad, though.
Life's just harder in my bracket.
Get on his level.
So, okay, another thing about Twitter that I think Twitter isn't designed for nuanced conversation, obviously.
No,
it's like,
it is definitely not.
Every kind of social media isn't. It's always meant to simplify and remove all the nuance from conversation. But one of the things with Twitter is you're not just talking to one person. You're talking to one person plus followers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Plus anyone who retweets and their followers.
Yeah.
So you get these people who, regardless of their personality or their beliefs, are like vectors for like very toxic groups of people. Mm-hmm. To use an example of someone I quite like, Movie Bob. I really like Movie Bob.
Sure, dude. We'll just start mentioning names.
No, I'm not. It's not a negative thing here, but I really like Movie Bob. I respect him a lot. I like having conversations with him. But sometimes he retweets something I say, and I think I'm fucking in for it now, because he has like so many people hate following him. Mm-hmm. It's like it's like followed by a swarm of bees.
Yeah, like that's like the real tough thing too, is sometimes you're like, because again it's it's tough to I'm trying to think how to put this in the words. But like it's it is like very public. So what you're saying is in the public sphere to an extent, but like sometimes you don't. It can be upsetting to see something you say affect other people in a negative way you didn't intend. And it's like, there's like nothing you can do about that, which is.
Well, I mean, I had the perfect example when someone made a joke addressed at me a few weeks ago, and suddenly I'm being fucking attacked by a certain other person's followers for hours on end over something I didn't even say.
Yeah, like
because I was tagged in the tweet. It's ridiculous.
I actually got attacked for that, for being friends with you, and you were tagged in it. That's how far it goes.
Yeah.
This whole attacking people over being friends with people is so stupid. I mean, how many of us would have any friends left if we called out all the time and alienated any friend we didn't agree with about things,
Yeah, and I definitely think one thing that contributes to it is that it's way too easy, and this has been something that's been present for the internet for years. Like, this is nothing new, but it's way too easy to not think of the person on the other end of the keyboard as a person.
Yeah.
Like, it's way too easy to think of them in like a negative sense or whatever. And it's been that way for like that whole dehumanization thing. Like I'm sure you guys have this too, but like I have friends on Twitter who literally loathe each other. I mean, like, and I've seen them have little bitching matches at each other, and I'm just like, what do you do in that situation? Do you know? Yeah.
Well, like, I think people when they see like one tweet, especially from someone, and they instead of like they do dehumanize them and they turn them into that point, and so they see that person as like the embodiment of like this idea that they disagree with, and it's pretty harmful. Like, it doesn't do anything for the argument when you're like arguing the person, not the idea.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
I do get that. We as comic creators get that a lot. Where like I consider myself a feminist, and I post a lot of feminist stuff, and then people go, "Well, you use the word cunt a lot." And you try to explain that you can have a nuanced worldview. You can agree with some aspects of a culture and disagree with others. And people on Twitter just hate that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
you have to be in one gang or the other gang.
One of the boxes.
Yeah.
You kind of stick out in the cold.
But that's weird cult-like thinking.
Well, it was basically just, again, it comes down to dehumanization, like the tribalization thing. Is that sometimes it's way too easy. Excuse me. It's way too easy to like segregate and divide people up into categories, and then like not be willing to understand that they may actually have personalities across several categories. There's so few people out there that you can probably say, oh, they're one specific type of person, they fall under this particular label. But like too many people, like I view myself as a feminist also, but I'm also like a bunch of other different labels. I would say as awkward human being, nerd, used to be kind of a Republican in my younger years in college, but then I grew out of that to change more into a liberal, and all that jazz. And it's like it's way too easy to segment people into those groups. And then I think it kind of also ties into like that way it makes it easier to deal with, like people do that to make it easier to deal with them a certain way. Like, Gray claims he's a feminist, but he says, cunt a lot, therefore I'm going to use that against him to deal with him in a certain way that makes me feel better, or makes me, it's like that's not how it works. It's like you need to have a conversation with him and understand why, he says those things, like.
I think there's I think there's a very big tendency to, for a lot of the people who do get into these arguments to be very America-centric. And it's hard for them. Well, I don't think it's hard for them. They just willingly don't really want to see things from a perspective from outside of America and from a different culture that isn't like theirs and doesn't have the same history theirs has.
Oh yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah. It's the term is anthropocentrism, and it's the belief that the culture or area that you're from is clearly the superior to everyone else's.
Or I think they just believe that everywhere else has the same history with certain things that they do.
Well,
we don't. We really don't.
Like,
So that's been a huge issue with feminism all the way since like the 70s and the 80s. People were saying like feminism, and especially like academic feminism writings, were very centered on white, like upper class females.
So on the subject of Twitter and journalism, one of the hardest parts of game reviewing I've found now is writing. I used to really enjoy writing like takedowns of games, very brutal, unpleasant, snarky takedowns, and going on Twitter and finding out that a lot of these developers are like human beings with aspirations and feelings.
Yeah.
Can be very difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like it's like it's one of those things where it's like you need to critique the product and not the people necessarily behind it.
And Cory's sending me a message which is don't mention Frozen Cortex guy. The other day I was complaining about how Frozen Cortex, the sequel to Frozen Synapse, just didn't appeal to me at all. Like the concept just wasn't. Mm-hmm. And the guy who makes it kind of messaged me and was just asking me kind of like why. And I'm like, dude, it was like it's a throwaway tweet. I just want to gripe. Mm-hmm. I don't want to think.
Don't be a human at me. Don't
like,
show your
I legitimately want to know, so the next game will appeal more to you, you know, so I can get you as part of the larger demographic. And you're like, I don't know what to say to this.
And that's happened a few times where I've said something, and then a developer who keeps an eye on social media has like immediately responded, and none of them have ever been angry.
Well,
they've always been very understanding.
Not like some of the people that Jim interacts with.
Yeah.
Jim gets all the good ones.
Yeah, he gets all the good ones.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we've all heard horror stories. Like the Peter Molyneux thing recently is, you know, a good example of that. I think to an extent, because it's like.
What do we think of that?
Well, personally, I think what it is that he just Peter has like. I think he just has an issue with just exaggerating and overselling, because I have no doubt that he believes what he's doing is cool and he's making awesome games, but the problem is that I think what he's saying doesn't quite always connect to reality, and that, like, I agree with, like, Jim Sterling did a Jimquisition about it recently, about the Peter Molyneux cycle, about how, like, you know, oh, Fable 1's going to be A, B, and C, and then it comes out and it's only A, and then Peter gets on the, you know, comes out and says, oh, well, Fable 1 was crap. Fable 2 will be the one that has A, B, and C. You know, and I think that's the issue there, is that like he just oversells himself constantly, and when it comes back to bite him in the ass, like instead of just like stopping and be like, okay, I really do need to stop doing this, or I need to examine, you know, what I'm doing here, he just doubles down, and like it's almost like that infamous rock paper shotgun article honestly felt like he just went full on defensive mode, you know.
Well, I would too if the opening question was.
Yeah, well, the opening question was really bad. Like, I would not have opened that interview up with.
I've been looking for games journalism like that for years, like just really vicious and, you know, taking no prisoners and really holding developers to account. I just think Peter Molyneux was kind of like not the target I would have chosen. Mm-hmm. Like he's a bullshitter, yes, but I've always found him kind of charming.
Yeah.
I think he's a little too serious for that sort of question.
I felt genuinely bad for him. I didn't read the Rock Paper Shotgun, but I read Laura's interview. You know Laura, who does the Podquisition with us. She did a fantastic interview with him, and at one point I really genuinely felt for him. He was talking about how like his family were getting death threats and things, and that's just appalling.
That's just horrifying. To that, and like I even reading the rock paper shotgun thing, I also felt bad for him as well, because it was like, again, you know
what was kind of annoying though, nobody in the press stood up for him about that, about his death threats and stuff. They just continued to pile on him. Yeah, nobody kind of stood up and said, hey, hang on, this guy's getting death threats, maybe we shouldn't exacerbate this.
No one wants to admit their part in it, really.
Well, it's also, again, like tough to given the current climate of how, again, like social media and the internet has been over the past, I want to say, couple of years. Like sometimes it can be really hard to take a stand on an issue because of how it may like backfire or how it may affect you. Like there's a lot of issues over the years that like I think that games media or, you know, game developers or whatever should have stood up for and taken a stand on, and they didn't, and it's because you know. It's because of the issue. I'm trying to think. I think it's like just an issue of like, you know, if someone's on fire, do you necessarily want to try to put them out if it's going to result in you getting set on fire? Like that's the mindset.
And then sometimes even if they are completely and utterly in the wrong, is it worth being yet another person on their dog pile? Because there was I even saw something this week. Obviously, I'm not going to mention names again, but there's a person who gets in a lot of controversy posted up something to get some other people in trouble that turned out to be completely bullshit.
Yeah.
And basically proved that this person was completely full of shit.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was so tempting to kind of say something. And it's like, oh, well, look, what a surprise. This person's at it again. And, you know, it was just like, no, it's not worth being another shouting voice on that dog pile, do you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think the targets for these dog piles are always so frustratingly easy. Like, I mean, that review, like I said, that interview with Molyneux was an exciting read.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, like I said, the dude's a bullshitter, but, like, in the general scheme of things, he's running a small indie company. He got a little bit of money off Kickstarter. And I think Ubisoft has done far worse in the past kind of 4 or 5 years.
For sure. Like, there's
in terms of like raw bullshit, how about showing off trailers that are just nothing fucking like the actual product you're selling?
Oh yeah,
I think that's the problem with their production cycle and how they feel the need to always like promote things through journalism. Like they always need to like show things off, and like with Molyneux, like I'm sure he's like, this game will have A, B, C, because it's like he has A, B, and C on like a whiteboard in his office with like everyone's trying to make.
Yeah, that's certainly.
No one's going up to like Ubisoft CEO and like holding him over the fucking coals. Mm-hmm. They go after Molyneux, who, because of the size of the company he's working for, has far less of a capability to defend himself.
I think it's also the personality involved too, because like everyone knows who Peter Molyneux is, not everyone knows who the CEO of Ubisoft is.
Yeah, and have you seen like any video on YouTube that has had Assassin's Creed in it in the last 6 months? The comments are really, really hateful. Like, you know, it's a sea of like anger. You know?
Well, it's always directed at the wrong people. It's directed at the community managers.
Yeah, I know. And I know that a lot of the Ubisoft community managers, and they're such good people, those guys. They're such nice people.
And as someone like who went to school for
disclaimer, Gav has done some promotional work for Ubisoft.
Yes, I have. And I'm also would consider a couple of those Ubisoft community guys my friends as well. So I'm not going to...
full disclosure for the Gamergators listening to us.
Yeah.
But like
this isn't a review, so
it's not that bad once the patch is installed.
Hey man, I've been playing like 20 hours of that game this week.
Been trying to sell me on this shit.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah, I may this may be the first one I go back to buy.
It's like brilliant.
But yeah, like I went to school for game dev, and like there's always going to be a lot of people involved in game making, so it is really frustrating to see like how the anger gets directed when a game doesn't quite deliver. You know, because sometimes it's not.
I'm sorry, Bev. You do realize "forget" is spelled with an O, not an E, right?
What?
Sorry, Bev just handed me a note saying "don't forget." Ferget. Bev has a degree in English.
Things happen, dude.
Hey, we all make mistakes, man.
But on that subject, I was gonna mention. Oh man, so like people I know who work for Nintendo, like the Fire Film guys. They oh man, I'm actually forgetting his name. Who's the Fire Film guy? It's Kyle, Chris, and Dan.
Yeah.
Yes. Chris, yeah, he works for Nintendo, and he always like starts off his conversations like, I work at Nintendo, but I'm on a team. Like, don't think of me as like Nintendo. Think of like the team as Nintendo.
Yeah.
And, like, I think that's something some devs don't do, and like I understand like the journalism wants to like see the rock star, like see the person at the top, like the Cliff Blazinskis and the Molyneux and all that, but it's
it's also an issue. Like that's what people want to read sometimes is the rock stars. Like I've done interviews before with various like the last interview I did or major interview I did was on Assassin's Creed Unity. And like I met like 2 or 3 designers, I got their names and all that, but like, you know, the interview like did okay, but like unless I interviewed that guy who's we're always seeing, like I can't remember his name, but he's always like he was the one I think who dropped the infamous "women are hard to animate" statement. Like he's more of a face of the Assassin's Creed series than any of the developers I talk to, so people kind of want to hear what that guy has to say. And it's kind of sad that they don't want to hear what the guy who did the multiplayer for co-op design has to say, you know. So that's another issue too, that sometimes it's like, you know, the readers want to put more of a face to the name. They don't want to hear about multiple people who made this particular game. Sometimes they want to hear just about the one person who's involved.
I think as a critic, I do tend to try and do that too. the idea of products made by a single artist are so much more appealing than the idea of a product made by a massive team of like with focus tested ideas.
Yeah.
Well, it feels so much more like art.
It's quite telling that the very best games, the very the top products that our art form has to offer are made usually by auteur directors. Your Ken Levines, your Kojimas, your Cliff Blazinskis.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a scale issue that they have an idea in mind and they keep things in scale.
Yeah.
You know, like that's the biggest thing with basically any kind of project whatsoever, is that it's way too easy sometimes to feature creep and start adding things on, and then like at the end of it you just have too much to do and no time to do it.
Well, we just talked about that on the last cast about what a huge problem that is in modern games.
Go for it.
It's totally a huge problem, and it's present in like not just video games, but it's present in a lot of things.
This lets us move on to another recent topic, actually. Game length in particular. So, the Order, 1866, 1886, 1866?
1886. The
came
80s.
out recently. And is about as long as the average orgasm. So,
Average.
it is a very short game.
Yeah,
And I've always struggled with grading short games because I like short games. I like the worst thing a game can be, I think, in my opinion, is too long.
That is true. For me, it's always been the type of game and what experience is offering. Like the Order 1886. Like I feel like from what I've seen of it, it seems like, you know, okay, it's going to be a linear third-person cover-based shooter. It should be about 8 to 10 hours, because for me, that's what feels like the average. Like from my years of playing all these various, you know, third-person cover shooters, that like feels like the average. It should be like a weekend-long game.
My argument there is, as a critic, there's a difference, I think, between being a reviewer and being a critic. And if you're only talking about how much bang you're getting for your buck, how many hours you get for each dollar invested, compared to is this game long enough? Does it do everything it sets out to do? Does it overstay its welcome? And I think we've suddenly got quite a lot of games that are overstaying their welcome quite substantially.
I think that's
You know what game I think really nailed it was Wolfenstein. I think that really nailed that balance between the time you spend playing it and the quality of your time spent playing it.
I've heard arguments that the kind of filler missions where you go into the hideout are a little bit of are just filler.
Yeah.
And
I would agree with that.
Tend to disagree, because I love the game. I think it was my favorite of 2014.
Oh yeah, it was a really solid
mostly
game.
because everything else was shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was the perfect length, though it did leave things unresolved.
That is true. I mean, I liked how it wasn't an ending that screams sequel bait like The Darkness 2. Like that was the last first-person shooter I played that I felt had the worst ending ever, because of just how sequel or DLC bait heavy it was.
Well,
It was a
Half-Life 2.
short game.
Half-Life 2, man.
Yeah, well,
To be honest, people raged about that Half-Life 2 ending.
Ending.
yeah. I mean,
And rightly
until-
so. It really was sequel baity, like especially
Yeah, well,
the episode 2 ending.
yeah,
Jesus.
I mean, Valve. That's we could have a whole
They
conversation.
didn't think
on-
that
Valve,
one
isn't
through.
Yeah, we could
considering
have a
how
whole
long
conversation
it's
about
taken them to follow it up. Like, there's going to be, when Half-Life 3 comes out, there's going to be like a lot of people who who died and never found out how it ended.
Well, we could do a whole podcast on my thoughts on Valve at this point, because I used to be the biggest Valve fanboy, but not so much anymore.
They've actually made quite a few un-Valve-like moves in the past few years. I think they've fucked over Steam by just opening the floodgates of bullshit.
Yeah.
They recently introduced a pay-to-win mechanic in Dota 2.
And it's also
they're ruining a lot of the visual the theming that they did originally with Dota 2 with the marketplace and stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, it's even worse in Team Fortress 2.
Yeah,
If you go through the tutorial there, they explain at length how every character was designed so their silhouette is immediately recognizable from any distance. And then it's actually we can make $1 bajillion by selling hats.
Yeah.
And then it's fuck that, fuck artistic integrity, hats.
Yeah. Hats everywhere.
Actually, speaking of big companies kind of getting a free pass from the press, Nintendo's recent announcement of its partner program for YouTube.
Yeah, I am not. I do not think that's the greatest of ideas, especially if it's like I'm using trailer footage that they provided to press outlets for public use, and I'm like running a small, YouTube channel as my own press outlet because I'm trying to get big, and it's like, well, you're not going to go to like those websites, like you're not going to go to IGN and GameSpot and demand a cut of their share for hosting your trailer, but you're going to come to my YouTube channel and ask me to fork over a share for doing the exact same thing that they're doing, if not even, even if like it's like I'm actually doing something with the trailer. Like, it's really weird that they decided to go that route.
Maybe that's how they're like. That's how they stop criticism. They just charge people to criticize now. It's like, you can criticize us on YouTube, but we're taking a cut.
People are still trying to stream their stuff. I was watching a video the other day about a guy who jury-rigged like a 3DS capture system.
Yeah, because they have really weird
phone and a microphone attached to like fucking stands and shit.
Yeah, they have really weird rules about.
Because there's no capture.
Yeah, that's why when I worked at Escapist, like I reviewed some 3DS games, but we never did any video content for them because like you needed to have a very specific setup. Like they had to send someone over to hook up a 3DS in your office, like in a very specific way for you to capture any video of it. And it was like,
I think it should.
There's too much effort to do that to get video content for your of that particular game.
They're just so far behind the times in that way.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It shows a very big lack of understanding on their part of how the communication between gamers is selling games these days.
Yeah, or how they consume content related to games as well.
Like, surely someone must have been paying attention to Twitch Plays Pokemon.
Yeah.
Like, surely someone at Nintendo saw this and went, why aren't we doing more of this? Why aren't we getting into this free advertising?
Yeah, like, why are we, like, sponsoring
instead, they
this
kind
guy?
of thought, why aren't we just stealing half of this person's money?
Yeah.
I've maintained for, like, the last 4 or 5 years that the two main reasons Call of Duty has remained as popular as it has is 60 frames per second on console and YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
It's YouTube.
YouTube
that has kept that community relevant, like, and that kept that game relevant to its community. Sorry, because I mean, when YouTube kind of game streaming exploded, it was Modern Warfare 2 that made that happen.
Yeah.
That's when it really became a huge thing that like millions of people every day were tuning in to watch these dudes playing Modern Warfare 2. And that's what has, in my opinion, kept that game at the top, is the YouTube community built around it. Like, there's more people watch Call of Duty's videos every day than actually play Call of Duty.
Yeah,
so
I think people watch it while playing Call of Duty.
No.
I'd imagine.
I do wonder if the traditional games press feels they have a mandate to defend YouTubers. Because, like, well, if you think about it, every journalist worth his salt is pro-consumer by default.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily always mean agreeing with the consumer on everything. Sometimes a good journalist tells harsh truths. But are YouTubers, are they consumers, are they readers, or are they the competition?
Oh, they're the competition. I think
they're very much the competition.
Absolutely the competition. And I think you do see a lot of again, no names I will mention, but you do see a lot of little back and forths on Twitter between YouTubers and between journalists that you can almost feel that from both sides it's motivated by that competition and that jealousy and
so,
that kind of thing.
A lot of YouTubers have jumped on the Gamergate, all traditional media is corrupt bandwagon.
Well, isn't that the funny thing?
Because it feeds into their agenda perfectly. Likewise,
as well
the
as that,
traditional press can be very dismissive of YouTube gamers. Did you see the reaction when PewDiePie's response to Evolve, I think, was on the a billboard?
It was like,
and everyone was sneering and whining about that. And it's like, well, PewDiePie pulls in more views, has more readers, has more viewers than most of the large websites I can name.
And
he had a go at one of them last week, actually, for misquoting him.
Yeah, and it's also the matter of like what he's doing is working. Like his business model works for him and what he wants to do with video games. And like that's the thing is like understanding that we all have like there's also I think there's a lot of figuring out what's the best business model or best way to like talk about games and all these different mediums. Because like when YouTube first started, I never would have thought that it would be anything related to video games like the way it is now. You know, like back in college, I was like, oh, people put funny videos on or whatever. But like I never thought that someone would actually try to make a living out of talking about video games full time on YouTube, like the way PewDiePie does. You know
what strikes me as very strange is that even The Escapist, which arguably saw this coming more so than any traditional outlet, they saw Yahtzee and they thought, we want to get in on this. And they had this perfect example of how a personality-driven one-man show can do incredibly well. And no one emulated it. They just, websites kept on, traditional games media kept on doing what it's always done, which is reviews which kind of downplay the individual reviewer and instead focus on the website as a whole. While YouTube grew in spurts because people were tuning in not for what game was being reviewed, but for who was reviewing it.
I think it's fascinating. Oh, sorry, you finish first.
So when Total Biscuit can cover a big game and have tons of hits, and he can cover some piece of shit no one cares about and still get quite a few hits. He's just got a solid stream of content that's constantly coming out. Constant readers, constant ad views. Whereas with traditional games media, it kind of comes down to how popular the game that's being reviewed is.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons you see so many clickbaity kind of flame-stoking headlines these days. But it's fascinating to me if you look at the difference between on YouTube, and I'm talking general attitudes here. And again, I'm not taking any stance on this myself. I'm just observing a general trend, right? That if you look at, say, the gaming press, the official gaming press, or like articles, written stuff. It's of the vast majority of it would be very kind of I hate that term, anti-Gamergate, but it's very much pro Anita Sarkeesian, and then but if you look at YouTube, the vast majority of videos are anti and like that kind of thing, and I fall somewhere in the middle, but I just think it's a fascinating thing to see that no matter that on these two different mediums, there's completely different outlook on things and completely clashing ideals about things.
The problem I have there is...
God, that was hard to phrase without pissing anyone off.
I think lots of reviewers
did,
and critics are very critical of Sarkeesian. I also think it's a difficult subject to tackle because, I mean, obviously we've talked about this before about how I have big problems with some of the things Sarkeesian claims.
I think most people do. Just disagree with a lot of what she says.
If you voice those, even in quite a reasonable way, it's not that you get criticized from her kind of followers. I've never been criticized by any of them, even though I say some rather harsh things. It's that you get encouragement from the kind of people you don't want encouragement from.
Yeah, it's
like the closest analogy I can think. It's like telling jokes about Islam, and you can tell I can write some really funny material about Islam, but the people who are laughing at those are kind of not the people who I want reading my stuff.
Yeah, like I think that kind of ties in a lot back to some of the social media stuff we're talking earlier. That it's like it's way too divisive. Like I haven't like I think the issue is it comes down to not wanting to engage or debate the topic. It's attacking or whatever the person behind it. Like I'm sure Anita Sarkeesian has said plenty of things that are both good and bad or off, but the problem is that there's so few people who are willing, or I wouldn't say willing, but there's so few people who actually attempt to engage her ideas in discussion and debate and critique versus just attacking her and being awful.
I absolutely agree. How many people have seen that Thunderfoot?
And that's and it's kind of weird because it doesn't want to create an echo chamber, but it does create this thing. It's like, well, how come no one's being critical of Anita Sarkeesian when she says this? How come the gays media is doing A, B, or C? And it's like, well, that's because none of them are really find a problem with her discussion or debates or anything like that, or they don't want to engage her, or they don't want to critique her ideas or anything because the people who are more interested in spouting lies about her are going to enter the fray, and that's not a conversation anyone wants to have.
I don't think I've seen any criticism of her stuff. I've seen valid criticism of her work, but I don't think I've seen any that's completely free of like ad hominem.
Yeah, well, that's
overly aggressive like just anger.
I think a lot of the ad hominem comes from trying to associate a motivator to why she may be misrepresenting things. Is that a fair thing to say?
I would say I would definitely agree with that.
True.
Like, I definitely think what's some of her biggest critics are more interested in attacking her as a person than they are discussing her ideas or what she's said in her videos and all that. And I think that's the issue, is that they're trying to critique her as she's an outsider, she's not one of us, she doesn't know what she's talking about, versus this idea doesn't make sense because of this particular, facet or whatever of the game that she's talking about. It's more of like, it kind of comes down, I feel, to like the division and everyone has to be in a label and segregated into individual groups, and you have to be with us or against us. Like, I think it comes down to that kind of mindset again,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like I just find like I'm pretty much 60-40 with her most of the time with her opinions and her views and things, but I can't remember what I was going to say now. Sorry. Oh yeah, I think a lot of the time she actually makes good points, but phrases them very clumsily.
I mean,
the big one that everyone remembers is what she said about the male toxicity about not serial killers, but these dudes that go on gun rampages and stuff, and she meant to say something else with that, but everyone interpreted it in a wrong way. And I think there is some level of responsibility you need to take when that many people misinterpret what you're saying. You do need to be maybe more careful about how you phrase things and say things maybe in a more with more clarity and more.
I'm going to disagree with you there, Gav. I think she makes herself very, very clear and speaks in the mildest, most lukewarm way possible.
Yeah.
And people still sometimes accidentally, sometimes deliberately misinterpret pretty much everything she says.
Yeah, like the one frustrating thing that's always annoyed me about this is that I don't think she has ever said that the games that she's critiquing should have never been made or never be made ever again in the future. And that's like the
she
one
has
crux.
Never said
that's
that.
That's like a big key point of her argument, is that these games, like, it's okay that these games exist, but it's also okay that we can talk about them in a greater light, and it's also okay that we don't always have these games be the only games that exist. Like, that's like the whole she wants to destroy video games. Like, none of that has ever come up in anything I've ever read by her or seen by her, and that's like really, like, that's like so frustrating, is that these critics of gaming as a whole don't want to destroy the medium. They wouldn't be involved in this medium the way they are if they were out to destroy it. Or I mean, like,
they wouldn't if they didn't care about it.
They want it to be better and greater and all that jazz. And it's like, that's something I can get behind. That's like, if they were literally pulling Jack Thompson's and lobbying like actual laws to ban games, then I would be against that. But like, I'm not against someone who's like, let's have a discussion about the deeper meanings of these games and why they are the way they are. Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
To be clear, I do disagree with a lot of her conclusions, and I think she has a very unfortunate habit of exaggerating and interpreting some scenes in like the worst possible light.
Yeah, the Hitman one being the most notorious talked about example.
That's actually what gets me. I think she's very careful in how she phrases things, but she's not careful when it comes to small, apparently, seemingly irrelevant factoids. But she's got to remember that she is under scrutiny from millions of gamers who are very, very fixated on knowing your lore, understanding, the backstories. And every time she gets something like that wrong, she just gives them more and more ammunition to dismiss her argument as a whole.
And that's
also the statement that really got me was, the player cannot help but abuse these women. I was like, oh, sorry, what? I've played all these games, never once abused a woman in them, and I think that's a kind of insulting, actually.
It's
in fact, in Hitman, you're encouraged
wrong.
not to kill any of the strippers. But anyway, we're saying stuff that's been said a million times.
Alright, so now I'm curious, do you guys ever think that Metacritic will have ratings from YouTubers instead of websites? Like, if there's a Total Biscuit or a
I think if they start relying on review scores, it's certainly a possibility. But then again,
hopefully they're not going to adopt the review scores. Only the kind of the most surface level critics tend to.
Yeah, and that's review scores.
But that's what sites kind of stick on. The sites always have the review scores. Like,
Well, that's
less and less of them now, though.
Yeah,
A lot
well,
of them
it's
are starting
because
to go back.
it's because it's been a double-edged sword where some major publishers will not give you review copies or even talk to you if you do not have review scores because of the way they conduct their business. Like, they're only going to invest in franchises or give their teams bonuses if they hit a certain point, which is like, go ahead.
I don't think Metacritic actually will start taking it, because if you look at like who's the biggest games reviewer on YouTube, it's Angry Joe, and he's been using scores for a long time, and they never include his stuff on Metacritic.
Yeah, but you're gonna
did
need
they have
more,
like a list
you're
of
gonna need
like
more
what
of
they
them to do it.
consider the most?
Then again, they did use Rev 3's. I never knew how to pronounce that.
I always thought it was like
Adam
Revolution
Sessler's
3 or something.
Revolution 3 was at it. I never knew how to pronounce it. I missed that channel, man. That was a good channel.
Same here.
But they used to put their scores on Metacritic, did they? I can't remember.
Just to make things absolutely clear, fuck Metacritic. It's arse.
I definitely
is.
am not a fan of how Metacritic has become more.
It's
Or rather, fuck the agency that people give Metacritic.
Yeah, that's
it
like
is
I have no
everything
problem.
that is wrong with modern reviews in one
I have
place.
no problem with a website that collects all the reviews so you can see all the voices that are in play or saying whatever about a particular product. I hate the way that people have or that companies are using that to guide their business or whatever. Like,
Well,
Yeah,
problem
that's
isn't
like the way
review
they weight
scores, it's
scores
Metacritic.
too.
yeah, you know.
The idea that you can apply a mathematical weight to a review score, like even on the same website, is fucking ridiculous. Like on The Escapist, we had multiple reviewers, and a 5 from me meant something very different from a 5 from Jim or a 5 from Susan. The idea that those scores can be compared is ridiculous. The idea that you can compare scores between websites is fucking ludicrous.
Yeah,
the idea that you can apply some kind of fucking magical algebra and make it make sense overall is bollocks.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the biggest problems I always had, at least initially when I was first writing reviews, was like, how do I quantify what I'm saying about the game into a 5-point scale? Like, you know, Resident Evil 6, I think, is like a great example I could use for that, because for me it was like the most average game I've ever played. Like, it just, you know, I know you have different.
You're wrong, Paul.
Yeah, I know you have different thoughts on that.
I wish Gabe was here to explain how wrong you were.
Yeah, and well, hey man,
11 out of 10.
We should do a YouTube series on good bad games, and Resident Evil 6 and be our forerunner. But like for me, it was like it just tried too hard to be everything at once, and for me that's why it came across very average, and that's why I gave it 2.5. But like people had conversations with me like, "Are you sure it's 2.5? Like, are you sure it's not lower than that?" And it's like, well, for me, like an average game is a 2.5. Like that's across the board. But for other websites and other reviewers, even on The Escapists, like an average game was a 3 or a 3.5. You know, and it's like that's like one of the biggest confusing things is that there's like it's so hard. Like consistency is the word I think I'm looking for here. Like there's not going to be consistency among multiple reviewers and multiple voices reviewing the same thing.
Well, that brings up one of the biggest.
Yeah.
It brings up one of the biggest misinterpretations that the public has about games journalism sites. Like you'll always see on like GameSpot or IGN videos, the comments will be like, "Oh, I can't take you seriously anymore because you gave this game X and you gave the other game this score." And it's like, well, that was 2 different reviewers.
Yeah.
Who make completely different things.
I don't think I've written a single review for The Escapist that hasn't got, well, this is the site that gave Dragon Age 2 a 10 out of 10.
Goodness.
Fuck you, Greg.
Tito.
Fuck you.
He's never, well, he is going to live that down now, I guess, since he's kind of...
No, it's going to be on his tombstone.
Did Greg review Inquisition, actually?
I am literally going to spray paint that on his tombstone.
Did Greg review Inquisition?
Yeah.
No, he didn't.
Did he?
Oh, that's a pity. He did? Really?
Let me have a look. He should have, because that would have been fucking hilarious. He should have gave it 11 out of 10.
Yeah.
I think that was a joke we were all making, like, that entire year, up like every time there's a preview, and it's like, so how you feel? You know, it's 11 out of 10, you know. It's a 20 out of 10. It's a 20 out of 3.
There's a tweet here, I've just looked it up, and it's like, congratulations to Dragon Age for winning the Escapist Game of the Year 2014. Oh dear. But yeah, I like review scores. I like being able to. I like having to make that concrete statement. I just like to put it into perspective. One of the first games I reviewed was Gravity Rush for the Vita, and I adored it. It was utterly flawed, but I really, really adored it. I said it was like a really brave, interesting game trying to do something completely new. And then I gave it a 2.5 out of 5, which I thought was reasonable. And my review was by far the most positive one on Metacritic, but it tanked the game's fucking score.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like
Like,
that's
just
again like
demolished it.
that's why I hate the way I don't like the way Metacritic like just aggregates all that stuff. Like I think like it shouldn't have the average score for this is so and so number. It should be
And
like
again,
hey,
then-
there are positive reviews and negative reviews, and here they are. Read them and figure it out for yourself. You know.
And you again then get the thing that if it's a smaller game that maybe not so many sites reviewed, if one of those reviews is by someone who had a bad time with it, it's going to completely tank their score. Or if they experienced a bug that no one else experienced, or if they like didn't like the character, or it's just
It's a difficult situation.
Oh, it totally is.
But I think the best path for games journalism right now to kind of maybe reverse the course, like the downhill course it's having, is to get more reviewers with distinct personalities and to really push those personalities.
Yeah.
Push individual game reviewers that people can know, and because you're never going to eliminate bias. All you can do is make sure that the readers are familiar with your biases and they can filter them through that.
Yeah, and it's also again like remind readers that reviews are subjective. There's no such thing as an objective review that actually says anything about the game. Like there's a website that makes fun of purely objective reviews of video games, and it's literally a feature list.
I love that website.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
it's such a good website. But it's like you need to understand like people are going to have opinions on this game. You need to understand where they're coming from with their opinions.
To be fair, I think Jim Sterling actually did that joke first when he did a objective review of Final Fantasy 13.
I love that video. Like
he's got such a deadpan voice when he wants to. It was fantastic.
I think the 5-point scoring system to me is a lot better than the 10s and the 100s because
Like,
there's
why? What possible difference does it make?
well because there's so much more wiggle room between what each little star gives. I mean, like who the fuck can assign you if I liked this 4 out of 5 is so much easier than I liked this 87%.
Yeah, that's been
The idea of there being any scientific accuracy to it is what's wrong. It's gamers
that's
going,
why-
this game clearly isn't a fucking 87%, it's an 86.5.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that was a discussion.
That's why like a smaller scale is like a strong idea. Like
Yeah, well,
think of
exactly.
movies,
The
you know.
5-point scale, it's a lot more. What's the word I'm looking for? It's a lot.
Open to
Each point in it is a lot broader
Yeah.
than say in the 10-point scale, and it's.
I'm actually a lot more fond of letter grades.
That's actually not that unreasonable. Like I think
And
I think
I think because the best
You
thing
just
it
wanna
does
get
is
an
it
SS,
implies
dude.
there is a failing grade.
Yeah.
Like there is a point where you're reviewing a game and you're like, this is just dog shit. There's no point in me explaining like to what degree this is dog shit. There is just like a minimum quality
you're reviewing
that game
Dark
should reach,
or,
and this is below it.
Yeah, Road to Hell Retribution or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
no, this gets an F. This is not.
I wouldn't even give them
Kane
an
and
F. I would just unrate them. Just they're not worth the time it takes to review them.
it's the assignment you return to the student. Just do this again. Have it on my desk for the weekend.
Speaking of reviewers giving up, have any of you seen that Destructoid video on the fishing mini game in Nier?
No, I don't think I have.
no.
Where
No.
the guy was trying to catch a fish and he didn't finish Nier. He couldn't review the game because he couldn't catch this fucking fish.
What?
And he was just getting so angry, and he goes into this fantastic rant about how you shouldn't tolerate games that waste your time with fishing mini games. And then it turns out he was in the wrong area to fish.
Oh no.
Of course.
Oh.
I mean, that's what it's gonna be.
Well, to be fair, that's
Which
probably
brings up a
the
point
game
of-
didn't communicate that very well
Yeah.
to him.
Yeah.
With reviewers being
Yeah.
bad at games, which is always a strange
Yeah.
concept to try.
Yeah,
and tackle.
and like it's like, you know, are you at that point? Is it a developer's fault, or is the viewer just not like putting the effort in? Because like I always tried to play games as much as I could and all the way through if I could for a review, but sometimes it was like I have no idea what I'm doing, and the developer is not telling me what I should be doing. You know, and it's like,
You know what's really a thing that bugs me about a lot of reviews is they never ever mention technical stuff. They will go
I
on and on
completely
about
agree.
like story and graphics and all this. Yeah, it's this. They never mention stuff like frame rate dips or like how it runs, or I don't know. Why is that? Is it just?
I think it might
It's-
depend on your reviewer that you're reading. Because for me, like I never cared at least with my reviews, and this is just me personally, unless it was like major, like unless it was like a major factor of like the graphics or the technicalness of the game, I never really considered how much weight they had and what kind of review or what I said about the game. Because like, unless like the graphics are really bad and it's really noticeable and it's detracting my entire experience from the game, like who cares? Like that's my opinion. Like there are games out there that look absolutely horrible, but they're the most fun, enjoyable things that like someone's ever played, and there are games out there that look amazing, but they're complete pieces of crap. You know, so it depends on your reviewer, I think. But like I think at this point, maybe because again, like, you know, gaming has expanded. It's a lot more robust. There's a lot more people playing games. Like sometimes the focus is, I think, a little bit more on what content is actually in the game versus how pretty it looks.
I think which outlet you're working for does affect that too, because obviously I'm quite a technical-minded gamer, and quite often my reviews would contain like not super advanced technical breakdowns where I would mention frame rate, frame tearing, like FOVs, that kind of stuff, and without fail, Susan would tend to pull a lot of that content, and she just said like no one, you know, we've looked at what people like to read, and no one actually gives a shit.
Yeah, it's
I don't know. I mean, disclaimer, another friend of mine. But if you look at Total Biscuit's channel, he doesn't do reviews as such, but in most of his videos, I mean, it's primarily a PC channel. He will go in and spend 10 minutes going through the graphics options menus and showing you how it runs with different settings, and look at the views he gets.
I absolutely agree. But I also think he's not a critic.
Yeah, no, he's not a critic.
He is. He does feature lists.
Well, yeah. He
to be fair, like that's not meant to.
But he says that himself. He says this isn't a review.
That's not a diss. That's just what he does.
Yeah.
And
he says it's not a review. It's a first impressions. Like. And
I think with written reviews, tech stuff is kind of a lot more difficult to get across without it being too dry and just like boring as shit.
Yeah. Like that's
I mean, of course, that stuff is much easier to show in a YouTube video. Like,
it's the difference between text content and video content.
But I will add, I am getting incredibly sick of reviewers letting huge technical issues pass through reviews.
Yeah, me too.
Like fucking The Darkness 2 on PC, and none of the reviews mentioned the FOV is so incredibly tight that people. I mean, I felt sick, and I'm not that susceptible to it. But I just couldn't play the game till it was patched because the FOV was so tight.
Yeah. Well, for me, were you reading PC reviews of it? Because I reviewed it on the 360, and like I'm one of those people that FOV doesn't really affect me that much, and so like I was on the console for that. You know, like were the PC reviews not mentioning the FOV or?
Well, I think the problem was we don't get PC reviews.
That is true. That sometimes like the review copies sent out don't always.
and FOV does tend to be specifically a PC problem.
Yeah.
It's funny though because so many, I think in any game that has head bob has to by default have an option to turn the damn fucking head bob off. Like, it just makes me so nauseous when games have head bob. I remember having it in Fear 2 on the console, and I remember getting it last year with Wolfenstein. I had to go into the INI file and tweak that to turn off the head bob.
You can't turn off head bob in Wolfenstein, you fucking Philistine. It's what the original game, like in the original game, he like sways all over the place.
One hour into the game, I was ready to puke, and I had a headache. I had to turn it off.
You've got to get one of those like bouncy city balls and like just mimic the movement, just like bouncing back and forth.
On a bungee ball.
Yeah,
I don't know how
get
people
some VR going. Get an Oculus Rift, and then it'll just.
But Fear 2 felt like you were tripping over your shoelaces the whole game.
But actually, if any game developers are watching this, please, for the love of God, let us turn shit off.
That is definitely, I would say,
like a fucking motion blur, those crazy color shaders you put on everything. Chromatic aberration, fucking. Yeah. What else do they love to do?
The HUD. Jesus Christ, give us a hotkey to just turn the HUD off. Especially if you make pretty games.
Yeah, that's definitely a usability thing right there. Because that stuff shouldn't be that hard to program in as like an extra feature, you know. Because they have that stuff.
And you know what? It's good. Sure. It's good for your game because people are going to share good-looking screenshots of it on Twitter.
Yeah. One of my favorite.
On NeoGAF, there are literally 1,000 post-long threads.
There's a website
beautifying PC games and then taking screenshots.
Yeah, there's a website I think called Dead End Thrills.
He's amazing.
They have
he's
like
fantastic.
4K or higher great pictures of games, and it's like really artistic and really great wallpaper stuff. And it's like some of them, you know, it's like obviously they went in and they used whatever mod tools the dev left in for players to mess around with to like remove the HUD or whatever, and they just look amazing.
Oh, they're incredible. Yeah, they're beautiful pictures.
Oh, very much so.
His Deus Ex ones. Oh my goodness, they're gorgeous.
Really, yeah. My favorite was the Secret World, because even though I didn't really think that game was that special, like it definitely has some really great visual moments.
Yeah.
If you turn off the waypoints in that game, it's actually amazing.
The Secret World.
Yeah, the whole game is designed so that you can play it without waypoints. Like you were supposed to figure out where to go based on like using the map and using the telephone directory and stuff. And then at the last minute, they clearly added this like terrible Warcraft navigation system that just turns it into walking towards GPS signals.
Yeah, that might have been like a usability thing they snuck in the end. It's like, oh, what if our players get lost? And it's like, well,
what a disappointing game that was.
Great universe, just very ho-hum.
They've Enslaved Up as their latest game on Dead End Thrills. I'm just looking at it there now.
Yeah,
that was an absolutely gorgeous game.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So, let's see. Here's one for you. The game critics are most wrong about.
That's
a tough
one.
Critics are most wrong about?
For me, it's got to be Resident Evil 6.
Oh, we're talking about
4.
specific games. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, well,
4.
like different concepts, and I'm like, wait a second.
Controversial one, Gone Home.
I would say that
I think a lot of people agree with you on that one, Greg.
I will reserve judgment until I actually play that game. It's been on my wish list on Steam forever, and I just yet to buy it.
I mean, this ties into what we were talking about earlier with the length of game versus price, but that game is legitimately about an hour and a half long. It's very, very simple, and it costs $20.
Yeah,
and
the price on that game
couldn't
is way too high.
I think I paid $5 for it during a sale, and I still felt kind of burned. And as interesting as I thought the narrative was, and as much as I love environmental storytelling, and as much as I kind of sympathized with the characters, I just couldn't, in good conscience, recommend that to people at that price. Hello, Don.
And that's the most fair criticism I've ever heard of Gone Home.
Yeah, no. Also, Gone Home has a bunch of gay characters, and that's totally gay, and I hate it.
Yeah.
Fair and balanced.
I love that game, but I agree with you. It was overpriced. But
So you said GTA 4, which I agree was.
I cannot fathom how the highest rated game ever on Metacritic is a game that A, the cover system doesn't work, B, has no fucking mission checkpoints, and insanely frequent ways to kill you unexpectedly and cheaply due to terrible AI and stuff. And every time it happens, you have to drive across the entire goddamn city again. And none of the reviews mentioned this. And I was like, what the fuck? That is a flaw that if it came out in a game now, there would be so much rage over it.
But
it's
at
such
the same
a
time,
huge
it was
fundamental.
So ambitious.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a game I loved, but it had some huge flaws that no one seemed to point out.
I'm trying to think. I don't think
we've mostly gone with overrated here, which is an easy one. I think underrated is a
underrated
one. Resident Evil 6.
Yeah.
Well, my sin of game reviewing is Fuse, because I definitely enjoyed it a lot more than other people seem to.
I never got around to it. I was really looking forward to it because it's Insomniac, right?
Yeah, it's Insomniac, and like I for me, like a lot of the criticism was that it felt very by the numbers third-person shooter, very focused, tested. Like they tried to go for something too serious as compared to like their initial like preview trailer, where it was kind of like more actiony, adventure-y with like lightheartedness. But for me, like the gameplay just felt really...
Jesus.
The cats. The gameplay for me just felt like really enjoyable, and I had a lot of fun with it. And like I did hate parts of the story where they like couldn't decide if they wanted to be serious or funny, but like overall, I just felt like it was a really decent third-person shooter.
Do you think it would have done better if they hadn't fucked with the art style?
I do think the art style wasn't the problem. I do think it was the story, and like I think what they should have done is that they should have had all the characters be a lot more jokey and sarcastic with each other instead of like serious super agents, and then like go from there, like kind of lampoon the whole secret agent thing, because like the gameplay I felt was fine. There's a lot of really cool things. The whole using your high-tech gear you know, to like help with teammates. And the AI was pretty good. Like you could do a lot of cool things if you were only playing by yourself. With just the like hopping back between, you know, the characters and like comboing stuff up. But like the story, I think, was the biggest thing that was just kind of like, it's decent enough to keep you along, but or keep you going, but it's not like really that groundbreaking, you know, to kind of like make you go like, oh, this is a really awesome story, you know.
I do think Insomniac suffered from a bad case of the grimdarks last gen.
Yeah, I think that definitely happened with.
And they pissed away a lot of the goodwill they earned with Ratchet and Clank by making Resistance, which I think was one of those. You know how towards the beginning of the PS3's lifespan, like any first-person shooter, like no matter how mediocre, did okay.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have a Halo, so everything was going to be the next Halo killer.
Yeah.
Well, you needed one. Like that's so easy to play a first-person shooter.
So
I think.
like Killzone 2 was awful, but everyone's like, oh hey, it's a Halo killer.
I honestly hate the phrase like game killer, because like for me that's like setting yourself up for failure. Like anytime I heard an MMO be described
The
in
WoW
any way, shape,
killer.
or form as a WoW killer, I'm like, well, it's gonna fail, because WoW is WoW. Don't try to be better than WoW. Be your own thing, and then that's how you succeed.
I kind of miss it. I miss that. It's one of those kind of almost like 90s terms that's hung on. Like there was always going to be the Mario killer and the Sonic killer, and I do kind of miss that exaggeration.
I can think of a game that I think is really underrated. I'm not sure if it was underrated by critics, but just underappreciated in general, which was Bulletstorm. I fucking
I feel like
love
a
that.
lot
I
of
actually
people
do
liked
agree.
it.
I think the story was bad, which didn't help, but
yeah, it was so ridiculously fun, and it did so many new things in fun ways that hadn't been done before, and I'm amazed nobody ripped off. Like kicking a dude into a cactus and like putting a bomb thing around him and kicking him into his buddies. How is that not in more video games? You know?
Yeah, the closest
combo
thing,
system was really
the closest
good
thing I can think of that is like Far Cry 3 and 4, but I don't think it was as fast paced or combo driven.
Actually, there was a game
wasn't
that
as
preceded it.
interactive in Far Cry either. It was like an automatic takedown where you would put the grenade in his pocket, but in Bulletstorm you had to do all this stuff yourself.
Yeah.
And when you pulled it off, it felt so good.
There was a game that preceded it and actually did the same thing with a combo system called The Club, if anyone remembers that.
I'm trying to think. Was that a racing game?
No, it was kind of. It was very strange. It was a third-person shooter, except you did laps around a course, like collecting tokens and shooting people, and you had to keep a combo going throughout. And apparently no one's fucking heard of it except me.
No.
Well, I'm looking it up
I've
now.
heard of it, but
and it looks like... Yeah.
It was so underrated. It was so good.
Well, it looks like it was Sega 2008 is what I'm seeing here.
One game I think is underappreciated now. Like I think it scored fairly well at the time, but the first Assassin's Creed, I think a lot of people look back on it as like one of the worst ones in the series. Like
it was by far my least favorite one.
yeah. A lot of people don't like it, but I thought it created the world so well, and it had such a good feel of like being an assassin, and it was like not like the modern ones where it's like really easy to do combat. Like
it was the least gamey, I think, of the series. It was very focused, and it had a very specific aim in mind, and everything was tailored just to that.
And
I just found the game had too many annoying restrictions, like not being able to walk through the bloody city at a certain speed.
Trying to be
that was
authentic,
ridiculous.
Yeah, it was trying to be authentic, and I really liked that, honestly. Like,
a speed limit for your horse is authentic? Really?
Yeah, you're not supposed to run your horse through the city. Like you're gonna.
But no, it wasn't when you were out on the country roads. If you were like galloping, you would like get guards chasing you. I thought the restrictive nature of that game drove me crazy.
I don't know. It immersed me, I would say. The only problem is obviously going back and like not being able to skip the cutscenes.
That's definitely a sin of game development. Unskippable cutscenes. Because like at that point, it's like, no, that's a usability thing again. You know.
Okay, here's one. Could be a controversial one. Underrated. Bionic Commando.
Oh, you fucking tool! I don't actually know.
Tell us how you really
feel,
Gory.
It's so good. The story was, considering it was built off like a goofy SNES game, the story of his like wife being his bionic arm.
Yeah,
was, like,
I don't know what's going on there. Like,
but
what?
That game played like Spider-Man 2 for I think it was the GameCube. it was like the exact same system, and it's amazing. You're like swinging around, shooting people with shotguns, and it was like really, really good in that regard.
Wasn't it buggy though? I feel like I heard
No,
that
it
being the
wasn't
issue with
buggy. It had some fucking genius on the development team decided to have, like, if you went above a certain threshold, like a certain height, you would go into a toxic area that would kill you in like seconds.
Yeah,
And it was possible to like swing too far up and just like hurl yourself into the air, and you would just die before you could get back down.
Wow.
And it was such a bad decision; it just completely undermined the rest of the game. But I think overall, it was like criminally underrated. Speaking
it's
of
hard
underrated,
to think of underrated games.
I'm trying to think.
Legend of Korra recently by IGN.
Yeah,
like,
how was that? Like I was. For me,
one
like
of the worst
Platinum is like
Platinum
amazing.
games.
Like Bayonetta is like one of my all-time favorite games ever. Like I'm not really a person who plays the fighter genre, but Bayonetta looked so insane that when I picked it up, like I just had to pick it up, and then it was like the coolest thing ever. Like I was like breaking my hands trying to pull off the combos.
Korra was cheap and nasty. Like it was hella fucking cheap.
It did look like, and I think
But
they're doing a lot right now.
By like child's video game tie-ins, it was like really, really good. The problem was, it's like who is it aimed at? It's like it's a Legend of Korra license, so obviously you're gonna try and get some kids in it, but it's hard as fucking balls.
Yeah.
Legend of Korra fans are in that for the story, yet the story was like the most weird, spliced together from audio clips from the show, like phoned in bullshit.
That's horrible.
Like seriously, shoestring budget.
That is horrible when games do that.
Like the only people it would appeal to are fucking Platinum fans, and it launched like a week before Bayonetta 2.
Yeah.
Speaking of Bayonetta, and speaking of going back to the whole social media thing, have you seen the Twitter account of the original creator of PG? What's his name?
Cameo.
Yeah, Cameo.
Yes,
he is
I do follow
unbelievable.
Cameo,
He does nothing but insult fans all day long. And for some reason, nobody gets mad with him about it because he's just such a rock star. He just his entire Twitter feed is insulting fans.
Did you ever see that that interaction he had with Schreier from Kotaku?
No. Oh my god, I have to see this.
Someone asked him a question, and I forgot what it was now. They were mad at him about something.
Yeah.
They asked him a question, and he said his response was just, "Do you eat shit?"
Someone asked him once.
That's a man who has too much stuff on his plate for internet bullshit.
Yeah, someone asked him once, how does it feel to like sell your soul to Nintendo? And he said, how does your mother feel that her son is a massive disappointment?
Oh yeah. I love that guy. Like I said, like he's
such a rock star.
Yeah, he has no time for bullshit. Like he's like he probably saw that. It's like, dude, I'm trying to get a game done. I don't have time for this crap.
Oof, so I think we've kind of worked our way through to the end here.
Yeah.
This went surprisingly well. I was expecting without Gabe we'd kind of stutter and...
No, I would think we all still talked all over each other as usual.
Yeah.
And talked over Cory again. Sorry, Cory.
Well, no, it's good. Apparently Cory's microphone's terrible and he breathes too much.
Oh, okay.
I do what I can, but afford a new mic is not one thing I can do.
It's a good job. We're running a Patreon, guys. We're running a Patreon.
Well, I donated to your Patreon, so I now own you.
Are we doing plugs? Can I plug my website, paulthegoodman.com? I'm looking for video editing work. Hire me, please.
Yeah, and he's done a couple of my videos, which are awesome.
Yeah, they were so much
support,
fun to
support
do.
Paul.
I love doing videos for Gavin. They're so much
Even
fun.
better if you mute them and watch them without sound.
Yeah, I will say yes. I will take the risk and say yes.
I will actually link to some of your montage videos because they were really sweet.
They're very
He's
cool.
good at what he does, guys.
I like to think
Put it with my bullshit for like 2 years.
From experience, it's actually impossible to do.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, thank you for watching, guys. Tune in next week where hopefully Gabe will have returned and we'll talk about Metal Gear some more.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.